Welcome into the Michigan State Hockey Hub show. We have a special guest today. Pat's here to join us, and I had put out an episode earlier about Danton Cole, kind of the state of the program, and I always say this on every episode. I am in no way a hockey expert, and especially when it comes to X's and O's and stuff like that. I'm just a guy with I'm just a guy with a microphone, really, which I don't know if people caught that intro because it was kind of out here, but so I decided, Pat reached out I reached out to Pat and said, hey, would you join me to talk about Danton Cole? So we want to bring on somebody who's more of an expert. Pat, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I played at the University of Minnesota for 4 years. Was an All-American there at Minnesota, drafted by the North Stars. The Minnesota North Stars. Was with that organization for 2 years. Opted to go to Europe, played in Italy for 4 years, got hurt before the 1992 Olympic Games, ended my career, and been in broadcasting ever since. Awesome. In a nutshell, had two older brothers who also went to the University of Minnesota. Both were captains. One played in the National Hockey League. The other should have, and decided not to play anymore. So there were three Michelettis at Minnesota, and in fact, I'm going to bring you back to 1974. Okay, or 1975, 76 season. Minnesota went into Munn Arena, triple overtime game, and they beat Michigan State to go to the Final Four, went on to win the 1976 national title. Some great Spartan teams back then.
Yeah, and, that leads right into our discussion. Michigan State, was a hockey brand.
Yep.
Well respected. The past few years, it's taken a noticeable step back, and that happens. Yep. I always say, building a championship team in any sport is extremely difficult, and it takes luck. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. It takes luck too. You get lucky with health maybe throughout the year. You get lucky with, puck luck throughout the year, whatever it takes. It takes a lot of luck. I mean, look at the Cincinnati Bengals. No one projected them to make it to the Super Bowl, and they did. Sometimes, it's just so hard to build a championship team, especially in college where you have players coming in and out. As you mentioned, Minnesota, they lost their goaltender mid-season this year. Stuff like that happens. We understand how difficult it is. Tom Anastas was at Michigan State, and it didn't work out. They moved on, and they brought in Danton Cole. And I love Danton Cole. I'm a fan of Danton Cole, and I mentioned this on my podcast earlier. He's different than what Michigan State is maybe accustomed to now with coaches. You have Mel Tucker at the football with football, very energetic, kind of a pump-up type guy. And you have Tom Izzo. Everyone knows his personality. Danton Cole's personality is a little bit different, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think some fans are just so used to those other coaches and amp up and stuff that they want that from every coach, and that's just not how it works. And when they brought Danton Cole in, and I want you to touch on this before we get started here. How long does it take? Because it's so different in hockey with when you're recruiting these kids when they're so young. How long does it take from the time a coach steps foot on campus till they kind of have their team established? Because Danton Cole's been here. This is his 5th year, and he still has recruits from the previous coaching staff.
Well, first of all, like anything, this sport is cyclical, and I'll take you back to the to the 80s and parts of the 90s. Michigan State dominated Michigan. I mean, they were the power in the CCHA. Michigan was a doormat, and Red Berenson came in and built that program up to what it was. But it didn't happen overnight. And once a really, really good program loses its luster, it's really, really hard to get that back. It's certainly not impossible. Listen, Minnesota went through it, at the end of Don Lucia's stint, of which he had a great coaching career and national titles, and but you kind of it lost its luster a little bit, and and that's why when I look at Danton, because he came in and it was a mess. It was a
Oh,
mess, and not only does it make it more difficult to recruit players, but to bring that zest back into the program. And so it's it it's very difficult. And it takes time and it takes patience. But when I look at this Michigan State team now, as we see it today, you can go back last year and they lost a hard fought game to Minnesota. Um, and their identity was we're going to shut it down and you know hope to get one more goal than the other team, right? 2-1, 3-2, that type of game. Is that the style Danton wants to play at Michigan State? I don't having not had a lot of conversation with them, I don't think so. But you play with what you have, right?
right.
So he's in a in a difficult spot in trying to regain that traction that they once had, and they're not that far away in my estimation. Um, they lack a little speed up front that hurts them. They lack some higher end guys, that hurts them a little bit. But their goaltending is good. He's got great work ethic out of his team. So it's going to take a cycle of just that one recruiting class to start gaining that momentum again. Because once he does, and he will, they're going to be back on top.
Yeah. And we saw something from Danton Cole this coming into this season that we have not previously seen. So last year, the COVID year, they brought in Charlie Combs from, I believe, Bemidji State. And Charlie Combs had a little bit of scoring touch to him, and that was much needed.
Yep.
Coming into this year, Middendorf, Lochran,
Yep.
Davidson, they went, and Chris Berger, who has not played this year due to
Right.
injury, they went out and said, okay, we want to make this team better now. We're going to bring in other players, and those players have made a huge impact. Now losing Lewandowski due to injury, their top offensive player,
Yep.
arguably, that hurts them a lot, and that's when you see the scoring depth. So when you play Minnesota and they have teams or players in the Olympics, or they have players out with injury, whatever it is, they have that depth that
Yep.
Michigan State right now lacks.
Yep.
So with me and Danton Cole, so his record's on the screen, collegiate record, 80,
Yes.
155, and 24. He was with a program that before Michigan State that, you know, first collegiate job type thing. He comes into Michigan State. He's won a national championship here as a player.
Yep.
And I think he's and you could speak to this much more than me. He's extremely well respected across the college hockey world, right?
Yep. No doubt about it. Danton and I, in fact, were teammates on a summer team, a sports festival, which they used to have back in the day. Um, and he and I, he's a little bit younger than I am, but I always I always loved the way he played. He played the right way, and and he was a good player. And he takes those concepts into teaching this group. Now, if you don't have the horses, it's hard. Okay. I mean, you mentioned it. You're going up against Minnesota, you're going up against Michigan, teams of that ilk who are right now winning the recruiting battles. But they're winning the recruiting battles more on reputation of what they've done lately than what the history of the program is.
Right.
Okay. And somehow, some way, and I of course Danton's in the mix for a lot of guys. Ultimately, you didn't get him. Um, I think I think he will, because I think the program is just that it's Michigan State, right? I mean, it's the Michigan State Spartans. They've been there before. They've won championships before. Um, it just it it takes a lot of hard work, but the good thing is that with the style that he plays, with the style that he wants to play, um, and the way he coaches, I just think that there's something there, and they need to give him more time to, to get that one recruiting class that's really gonna, start to gain the traction that they need to get where they need to be.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, some of these players are from the Anastas era that are still around, and when you recruit and he did do something that Anastas did not do, and none of this is confirmed, so I don't want to say that this was, but there were some players that when Anastas came in, they were under a previous commitment from a previous coach, and Anastas honored all of those. When Coach Cole came in, there were certain players that were no longer committed to Michigan State for whatever reason. Personally, I think that's good. If this is your program, if you don't see that player working in your program, that's not
Right.
only best for the team, but best for the player. The last thing you want is a player to come in and he's not fitting the system. Next thing you know, he's a healthy scratch most years, and he's unhappy. Who knows what that could do to a locker room too? So he was willing to show he's serious about the roster construction and building the recruiting classes. Now, my question is, I'm going to pull up the records. This was year one, 12 wins, year two, 12, year three, 15, 7 last year, COVID year, really strange,
Yeah.
no offense whatsoever. That year is a complete wash. I'm not even really taking that into consideration. This year, 11, 18, and 1. They started off very hot, and it looked like a better team, and it came to the break, and I said, okay, right before the GLI, they played in the GLI Western Michigan and Michigan Tech, two well-respected top 20 programs at that exact time. I think Western Michigan was 4.
Yep.
And they played really tough against those teams. And I said, okay, they have some grit to them. However, we're about to get into the thick of the Big Ten schedule, and this is make or break. And they've lost 10 in a row now. And at some point, I understand how this can go. This happens all the time, especially like in football. When you have a goal that's up here and it gets kind of squished in the beginning of the year, it's hard to finish that year sometimes. When Michigan State started losing to the Big Ten teams and they got in the thick of the schedule, it showed me two things. One, they just simply did not have the depth. Lochran and Lewandowski, two top 6 forwards, went out with injury. They have the goaltending. They always have the goaltending, it seems
Yep.
like. Right now, there's just to me, it's and you mentioned this, it's speed. And if you watch, anyone that watches the NHL knows speed is king right now in the NHL, right? You see Connor McDavid out there just skating circles around people.
Right.
This current team has some size and a lot of what I would consider, kind of bottom 6 type grit. They don't necessarily have the speed and the people that can finish. Um, do you think that's something that will just take time? Do you think any of these players are gonna develop into that? Or how do you get more speed? Is it just through the recruiting, or is that something that some of these players can develop in?
That's your lifeblood, recruiting. And I can tell you this: he's recruiting good kids. I had the opportunity to um, interview Middendorf and Cezanna, two really good kids, and they're committed to the. I mean, they're committed to this team. They're committed to the program. They love playing for coach for the coach. Um, you know, but you're right. Ultimately, when you look at Michigan with 7 first rounders, when you look at Minnesota with 3 Olympians, a couple first rounders. I mean, it all comes down to recruiting ultimately. And, there, I listen, I think they're trying. I think they're trying awfully hard. I think here's the deal. I think Danton knows what it takes to win. Okay. And, um, it's but when you're battling and when the program has been down, right? It it really it you have to work that much harder to get that number, to get that guy, to get that player, to get that players. Um, and here's where I think really the alumni can play a major piece in helping and recruiting. You've got to use the players that were there before that can tell the story about the program and what it meant to them, what it means to them, what it was like being a Spartan. All of that, together, I think is critical in building. But until you do, right? Until you get that class that is committed and is good and is fast and is skilled, it's going to be, it's going to be a struggle. Not to say that they can't go out and steal a game, because listen, I don't know if a lot of teams want to play Michigan State in the first round. I really don't, because they have the ability to steal one, and it might be something of that nature that's going to help propel recruiting. There's a lot that goes, that's involved in that. It's, hey, where's the program at? A, B, am I going to have a chance to play and play a lot? You know, so they need a spark to get it going, basically. And but I think Danton's the guy to do it. I really do, because he's knowledgeable. He treats his players well. The players enjoy playing for him. They're just an element away from getting to where they need to be.
Yeah. And in so many sports, um, oftentimes there's a quick trigger on a coach. It's
Yep,
so easy to blame the coach. And I'm guilty of this in tons of aspects. My favorite basketball team isn't winning. It must be the coach. It's always, it just
of
seems to
course.
fly over our heads.
Easier
And
to get rid of the coach than it is the players.
and the question I ask, and I said this on a podcast I recorded earlier. Um, the record is what it is, and that's fine. I don't like to judge coaches simply off the record only. There's too many other factors. My question is, how many of these players are getting better year to year, developmental stages? And to be honest with you, it's not that I don't think Coach Cole can do it. I just see a too large of a percentage of Michigan State's, skill players that are not developing at a rate that we think they should. So someone like a AJ Hodges comes in last year, Kyle Haskins both, and they showed some skill at moments as freshmen. I thought, okay, maybe a big jump into sophomore year, and neither one of them has been able to produce. Josh Naylor as well. How much of the developmental curve? And this is just a serious question. I'm not even trying to corner Coach Cole or anything. I don't know the answer. How much of that developmental kind of curve is just simply maybe we don't have the players that we'd like at that level, or how much of it is coaching at this age? Because I can see at a younger age maybe teaching different things, but when these kids are coming in 20 years old or whatever, how much development can be done at the college level?
Well, I think a lot of it is individual, to be quite honest. You know, um, did I have good coaching in terms of, hey, try this, try that? Here's where, X's and O's, blah, blah, blah. But individually, are you getting bigger? Are you getting stronger? Are you getting faster? Are you becoming a better stick handler? Are you becoming a better passer? Are you understanding the game? And a lot of that is internal, is yourself. Um, you know, I didn't become a really good goal scorer without working on it. You know, every day before my teammates got on the ice, I had I had the barrel of pucks, and I would work on my shot. And guess what? My shot got better and better and better and better. And boom, I get 48. Mike Donnelly from Michigan State had 59 that year.
That's just
Okay.
so crazy to
Yeah. All
just think
right.
about
He had
now,
59. I had 48. I thought I had a great year. Um, but so, a lot of it is, you can blame, oh, he's not developing. Well, I don't buy that sometimes. That's an easy scapegoat answer, because if you want to get better, you got to, as a player, you got to work on it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Now, depending upon a system, I mean, we can go deeper and deeper. Oh, this guy, he's not using them right or whatever. Yeah, well, there's give and take there, right? But I can tell you one thing: Danton Cole knows the game of hockey, and he can look at a player and say, you know what, this is what this is how you fit best. This is this is what you need to do to get to that next level, and second, and but more importantly, to help our team. And so, ultimately, they're losing the recruiting battle right now, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And 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 like I said, there's a trigger mechanism, whether it be an upset, whether it be advancing, whether it be anything, to say, hey, keep an eye on Michigan State, because kids hear everything, right? Kids read social media, you know um there's all of that involved in getting your program back to that higher level, and then keeping it there, because once you lose it, it's hard to get back. And that's what Michigan State is fighting. That's, Wisconsin, we thought, was back up there. Now they slip back down.
Yeah.
So, it's so competitive these days, with so many good teams in the parity, that it's you got to be at it every day.
Yeah. And and this is why I'm so glad to have this conversation with you, because like I said, I don't know nearly enough about all this stuff. And it's just easy, especially me, and I literally did this earlier this afternoon. I
Yep.
look at the record and you say 5 years in, and I said, maybe it's time to move on. And maybe my reasoning has changed, my thought process has changed after this conversation. And maybe it does just take longer than we realize. But I also think, okay, well, I want to make sure that the message in the locker room is fresh, right? If you're a player and you keep hearing the same thing and results are not changing, that could be difficult. Maybe they bring in a new assistant, or they change something. I don't know what the answer is, but I want to hear your answer. I mean, I know you've already stated it, but what
Yep.
happens with Danton Cole? He stays at Michigan State, you think?
I do. And I would hope so. Um, I think he needs more time, and like you said, he's got to get his own people in there. He's got to win a recruiting war. I think he has the tenacity and the want to do it. I know he loves Michigan State. He played there, but you know, the, again, I'll go back to, this was a program that went down, and when it went down, it went down, and
Yeah.
to build that thing back up, it's we all want things today, right? We all want things to happen today. Now, I'll give you an example here in Minnesota. We've got 6 Division I schools. Michigan is familiar with that. The state of Michigan is, with the number of schools that are in Michigan. Well, UMD wins back-to-back national championships, right? And all of a sudden, they're the go-to school. Now, UMD was down for a while, but Scott Sandlin had a recruiting class and had a system put in that that was just working. That was working. Well, what happens? Well, Minnesota loses a few of the players that they were in on, and then Don left, and Bob came in, and Bob just you know Bob went gangbusters with his recruiting, and and now Minnesota's starting to get back up. But my point too is, when you have that many schools, you know it changes, where 1 year can change, from getting the 2 or 3 guys that you wanted to losing them to another team. Now that program gets back up. And so, that's what Danton's got to do. And, with everything going on at Michigan now and, things like that, there might be an opportunity to jump back in the fray. And that's another reason why I think you stick with him. You got, stability. He's a good coach. He's a good person, treats his players good. The players like him. So I would just, I would, if I'm in charge, I bring him back.
Yeah. And, I probably don't give him enough credit. I
No,
did
you
about
don't.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. And listen. One thing about me, I'm not afraid to say if I'm wrong, and I'm not
Yep.
afraid to take any criticism. But
But you know what? Here's the deal. We're all coaches when we're not coaching, right? We're
right,
all coaches. We all have the answers, and sometimes it's not as easy as, oh, do this, do that, do that. It it's it takes time, and it's a
yeah.
battle, and it's not easy. Um, and so, but I understand the fans' point of view of, man, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? And um, it just you just got to keep grinding it out.
And one thing that we haven't even touched on, I just want to mention. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I
Yeah.
was going to mention it. Um, Danton Cole was the one heading the entire the new facilities that they're putting in right now as we speak or under construction. That was Danton Cole who raised the money. And if you talk about recruiting, and I mentioned this on the previous podcast, the facilities, nice, new, cool weight room, stuff that are, going to make
Yep.
you better as a player. That is high on the equation, right? But the highest is
Without a
winning.
doubt.
The highest is winning. As you've mentioned several times, kids want to go where they're going to win and have the best chance to set them up for the next opportunity. And what Dayton Cole has done that I've not given him enough credit on is, like I mentioned, he brought in Charlie Combs last year, who was one of the top point scorers. And he brought in those 3 players who have all produced this year. Okay, they're gonna be around next year. What if he does the same thing where he brings in a transfer, the freshmen are coming in, and, maybe I do need to think more about, okay, how long I think I operate and so many fans operate in the idea of other sports too, because we all watch other sports and we see football. Mel Tucker at Michigan State had a 2-win season last year. This year he won 11 because he brought in all these transfers and boom, everyone loves Mel Tucker. Sign him up forever. He's the best ever. Other sports can seem to flip quickly. And in hockey, it just takes some time to
Yeah.
to get those classes in.
Well,
So
I don't, I haven't seen the facilities at Michigan State, but I can tell you, talking to numerous coaches, that they know I can't bring a kid into here and have them look at this.
yeah,
Um, because they go into Wisconsin, name a school, doesn't matter,
yeah.
right? Who has better facilities, and kids kind of get enamored with that. And
Yeah, I went to Yost this weekend. You walk into Mount Ice Arena.
yep,
It's smaller, it's intimate, it's older, it's cool though. Like it's neat. You can walk around the concourse, see the ice the entire time. It has all the stuff of their history. It's really cool, right? That's me thinking it's cool. 19-year-old me walks in there and says, this is kind of older and smaller. And then you walk into Yost and it's holy crap. Look at this new, innovative, cool designs. Everything's
yep.
fresh. Like I understand you have to cater to a younger person's mind. And
It's unbelievable.
yeah,
This coach told me, he said, you know, uh, uh, I can't compete with Notre Dame when it comes to facilities.
yeah.
You've been to that arena. Maybe you haven't.
I
Uh,
have, yeah.
it's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And the weight room, the whole one side is all, locker rooms, office, weight room, lounge, all that stuff. Well, is that not going to impress a 18-year-old kid coming in? Of course it is. And so, yeah, it's almost like keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah.
You better, or else you're going to lose a lot of wars.
Yeah.
And so, maybe that's going to help the program. But ultimately, I think there's too much pride at Michigan State to not want to be at the top and and get back to the years where they were great, because they were great. They had
Yeah.
great years, great teams, great players, great pros. And so I just I think Danton ultimately, which is the basis of our talk today, is I think you give him more time, and I hope the fans that watch us understand that patience is really needed before you get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. Last question before we get you out, and you've touched on a lot of this, but
Yep.
how do you so from a fan's perspective, keep in mind I don't have any connection with this program. I'm just a guy who watches it on
Loves
TV.
the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, maybe I'm a little bit more analytical and tuned in than others, but if I'm just the average fan, I'm tuned out right now. I mean, it has been years. 2007, that national championship, that seems it used to not seem that long ago. That seems like light years from now. Year after year, losing record. And the thing is, they're really not showing enough progress, yada yada. 10 losses in a row. Like, it's not that we're giving up, it's the average fan isn't as tuned in. How do you fix this Michigan State hockey? Because here's one thing we've established and we know. They have a foundation of history. Not every program can say that.
No.
When you walk around Munn, you see trophies, you see all the pros that have been in there, you see the Ryan Miller stuff, the Duncan Keith hosting up the Stanley Cup, you see this stuff, and it has that foundation, which is so many programs do not. So you have the first building block, the foundation of the history. How does Michigan State take what they have right now and this slump that they have and kind of being, I don't, not a program of the past, but a program that's kind of lost its luster? What are the steps to building back to just, making the tournament even? I'm not talking about a national championship. That's very difficult thing to do. I'm just talking about being in and out, in the tournament mix year in, year out.
Well, I think we hit on everything, right? I mean, on the recruiting and such. I will say this, as speaking to your fans, you went there when they were good. You've seen them when they've been poor, but ultimately you love the game, you love your team, and attendance is down everywhere. But if you're a fan of Michigan State hockey, remain one. Go there, enjoy it. As far as the team, listen, we've seen teams throughout the years who are supposed to, we're supposed to lose first round. They pull the upset.
Yeah.
I look at Michigan State this year. They've got great goaltending. Their tandem 1 and 2 are as good as there are in the conference.
Right.
No doubt in my mind. I've seen them all. I've called them all. I know. And at some point, you know, they can make themselves miserable to play against. It's probably not the style that people are accustomed to seeing with Michigan State and their brand of hockey. But their brand of hockey now, they're not going to beat teams 5-1, 5-2, 5-3. They're not going to get to 5 very often, right?
No.
So they got to find their niche of like, okay, how can we win this game tonight? And it may not be, and see, and this is where I give Danton a little bit more credit also, is that he wants to establish a style that is Michigan State. Now he may not have that, but if you want earlier success, he may have to change it a little bit, we can win this game, but this is how we got to win it type thing. And stray from what eventually he wants to do. Now, whether they want to do that or not, remains to be seen.
Yeah. All right, Pat. Well, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your perspective and your knowledge as well. That was I felt like I learned a lot. And it's so a lot of fans in college hockey, it's so hard to kind of get deep into it. There's not as many people covering it.
Yep.
There's not as much insight, if you will. There's definitely not enough podcasts and just perspectives and stuff. So Hearing somebody of your background help break it down, I think will help a lot of us, including myself. So I just want to say thank you so much
No,
for
no
joining us
problem.
today.
Anytime you need me, give me a holler. It was my pleasure being on with you.
We'll definitely have you back. Thanks.
All right, take care.